All right. So again, my picture is this one. And first, of course, you have to draw it out. So let me move this so it's not shadowing. So if you remember how to draw an eye, you just draw the circle first. Then you start the tear duct. Follow the shape of the eye that you see over the eyeball. Put in the eyelid. Now, it might not be perfectly aligned with that circle, so really look at the picture that you're working from, whichever one it may be. So mine kind of comes up, and then it goes a little bit more of a slant. Then I'm drawing in just the shape of the eyebrow, so I'm not going to fill it in, because we're going to do that with pen. And then I'll start on the inside. So the iris, the pupil. Got a big highlight here that I'm going to leave a circle for. So for those other pictures, some of them have kind of like box shaped or square shaped highlights. So just kind of outline the shape of the highlight so that you know not to fill that in. And in terms of the eyelashes, we're going to leave those for very, very last. Because same as when we do just like a normal drawing, hairs on your face are on top of everything else, so you will do them last. Now, all I'm going to erase is the circle part. If there's any sketchy lines, I don't need to erase those because I'm going to be going over most of it with pen anyways. So I'm not going to worry about like the sketchiness and how not precise it is. It's fine. Once you got those outlines all drawn out, just say done in the chat. And again, once I see a decent line of people saying they're done, we will move on to starting it. While people are finishing that up, I'll just show you the one I finished earlier. I didn't do amazing on it, but it still gets the effect across. So I'll be showing you how I did all of this and why these are all stretched out. But I used mostly size and scale. I used some spacing and definitely some areas I used overlapping. So I used 3 different techniques. You might use other ones. It'll be up to you though, but that's just my example from earlier. And I might change mine this time. I don't know. We'll see if I feel like another technique might work better. All right, anyone else ready? All right, I'm gonna start. Again, if you miss anything, this video will be posted so that you can kind of see what you might have missed or see what you could change when you get to that point. So the first thing I'm gonna do is look at, lost focus, look at the picture I'm working off of, and I have like a bold eyeliner in mine. If you chose one of the other ones, you probably don't. I'm going to use my pencil first and just kind of outline that area where I'm going to fill in. Gradually gets wider. And then there's even one on the bottom here. And there's also the lash line on this one that I'm going to put in first. And then there's the eyeliner. All right. So for the darkest parts, we're going to really build up those letters. You might use a lot of layering for the pupil, especially I'm going to use a lot of layering. For the eyeliner, I will too, but I'm also going to write very small. So I'm kind of combining size with layering. So I'm going to start in the pupil here since everyone has a pupil on theirs. Remember, if yours does have a highlight, leave that. Do not fill it in. Otherwise, it'll just look kind of flat. Flattens out the eye if you don't have a highlight on it. I'm just going to use the word eye for mine just because it's an eye and that's a very short word to have to write. Now, when it's a general area you're filling in, like a solid shade, it doesn't matter quite as much what direction you write in. That comes more into play when you're doing a section that's maybe rounded or just has more form to it. Now along the edges, you'll see that obviously the letters form like little squiggly marks. If you don't like that, you can always choose one of the letters of your word that either has a straighter or kind of a more smooth round edge, and just use that letter along the edge to even it out. So I'm just using an E and trying to clean up the edge of the pupil here. You can turn your paper if you need to. So remember, when you're using micrography, the legibility of it isn't necessarily as important. Your viewer, of course, will want to try to see what words they see in the areas where it's obvious it's words, but in the darker areas like this, it's fine if you can't necessarily read it. Obviously, you can't read mine because I really layered them up. Now this edge here where that highlight is, I'm going to also kind of clean up that edge so that it's clear that that's just a circular highlight going over the pupil. And then I'm going to move on to the eyeliner. If you don't have this part, what I would suggest doing next is the line of the eyelid instead. Sorry, we're about to have a cat interrupt class. All right. This is going to be a great recording. So I'm going to start on the eyeliner, but like I said, you can start on the eyelid line instead. I'm trying to do the eyeliner pretty quickly. Now, if I wanted that darker, I could just go over it again. What I'm actually going to do is kind of stretch the word eye over those so that it doubles over it a little bit quicker than writing it all the way out again. So in those areas, literally all I was doing was just putting another word eye, but I was almost writing it like this so that it filled it in a little bit more and quickly. And this line's quite a bit thinner, so I'm going to write it really small. All right, so I've got the eyeliner part done. Now I'm going to move on to the eyelid fold. Now this one, definitely look at your picture and see where the shadows are in the picture that you chose. Some of the pictures have less of a shadow, some have more. Mine is a lot darker along here, and then it's lighter over here. So I'm really only going to focus on doing it like this dark right along this line here. And I've got more of a deep shadow here, so I'm going to put kind of an additional layer. And along here, since it's still kind of a crease, but not quite as dark, I'm just going to write those letters small, but more spaced out. So you can see kind of the value change going on there. Now, just for a contrast, the one I did earlier, instead of spacing them out, I stretched the letters more. That's another way you can do it. Just figured I'd try a different one for your example. Now, when it comes to making different shades of the skin, a lot of people are usually kind of afraid to fill the skin with letters because they think it'll look really dark, kind of like these shades, which if you're shading a spot that's really shadowed or darker, you can do that. But if the skin is more even toned or like mid to light tone, that's when you start stretching the letters, spacing them out, or making them larger. So we are going to just kind of work on the shading or the values of this part of the eye. So for here, I'm going to try to work dark to light up to the brow. Now what I'm going to do personally is stretch out those letters. I just think that kind of works best for rounder areas. You can of course do something else. You can space the letters if you want to. But I felt like when I did this way earlier, it turned out pretty well. And this part's even lighter. And earlier, I like really stretched out those letters. So I'm gonna try to do that again. Then on this side, kind of the same thing, maybe a little bit different though. Then there's actually for mine a shadow right here. So I might make those letters a little bit closer together there. Maybe I'll even overlap them a little bit. Then here I'll do similar to right here. And if you don't like the look of the stretched letters, like I said, you can just space out letters more or write them larger but not stretched out. It's just kind of a stylistic choice. And then this section in here is just all kind of like a middle gray. So I'm gonna fill it in with like just average sized letters of the word, and then I'll double over where it needs to be any darker. All right, so I'm going to do a small part of the eyebrow, um, the inside of the eye, and then hopefully get to the skin down there. But I might not finish the eyebrow just because it takes longer. So for the eyebrow, it's important to fill it in the direction that eyebrow hairs usually go. So if it helps you to put in pencil lines first, you can. So it usually goes up, then the top half starts curving, then goes down. And the bottom half scoops upward and starts angling down. So to do this with words, basically you do similar to how I did along the lines here. You can do it with little words, or you could do it with larger words and just add more layers. It's totally up to you which way you want to do it. Um, I usually use smaller letters though, because they are little hairs. So to me, it doesn't really make sense to fill it in with large letters, but if you want to try that, you're free to try it, because we are just kind of practicing using the techniques and deciding what one you want to use, and then kind of seeing if you like it or not. Because if you don't, then you have that as a frame of reference for your project. So I'm just kind of following along those lines that I put in. Now, say the picture you were drawing had very light eyebrows, you would space out those letters more so that they wouldn't look quite as dark, but you would still want to follow the direction of how the eyebrow hairs go. I'm going to stop there, but at the end here, I just want to point out that since it gets lighter, you will start, I'll show you my other example, you will start kind of spacing out the letters more. All right, I'm going to move to the inside of the eye just to make sure we cover that. Basically, we'll fill in the tear duct, we'll fill in some of the lash line, any shadow that might be casted, and then of course the iris. So I'm going to fill in the tear duct first. It's just kind of like a gray, so I'm going to fill it in pretty average. When I say average, I just mean like almost write it like you would be normally writing it. And then wherever it needs to be darker, you can kind of double over if you need to. I've got a little bit of a shadow here, so I'm going to do just some kind of stretched letters there. And for mine over here, it's a little bit darker on the very edge of the lash line here. And then it gets lighter, so I'm going to start just spacing those out a little bit more. just to show there is a lash line here, but not make it too dark. I'm just putting really stretched letters. And now for the iris. Now most irises will have a dark edge before you start in on the center. So I'm just going to use the word really small along that edge. Cat again. Very persistent today. Got my border done there. Now, if you remember when we did the face feature drawings in general, remember the inside of the iris all points toward that pupil. Remember, if you have a highlight, leave that there so that you remember not to fill that in. Then you can basically follow those lines with words. You can use them larger, you can draw smaller words. Really depends how dark or light the eye you're drawing is. The one that I'm using is kind of dark to light from the center. So what I chose to do earlier was I did the letters really close in the center and then I spaced them out. And again, I'm working out from that pupil. And if there's ever any areas of the eye you need to darken, like mine has shadows kind of right over it, since it's a shadow, you don't have to go with the filling of the iris because it's casted over it. So I'm just going to use some letters to make some extra shadows over the parts where they are in the photo. And if there's ever any areas of the actual iris that's darker, you can always double up on letters if you need to. Whatever you need to do to kind of mimic how the photo looks. Then the last part, besides of course finishing up that eyebrow, will be to finish up the skin here and then the eyelashes. So I'll try to go over this kind of quickly. For the skin or larger skin areas that are just kind of like an even tone, I usually like to use stretched letters. You don't have to. You can choose what way you want to go about it. I do suggest during your asynchronous time tomorrow, maybe choosing one of the other photos and practicing using other techniques. So if you use mostly size today or even stretching the letters, maybe tomorrow, just use spacing. So try to use all the same size of letters, but space them differently. So I really suggest tomorrow kind of playing around with the techniques and deciding what works best for you. So there I've got the skin. You can kind of see different values in there. If I wanted to add some areas a little bit darker for this one, I would probably double up on certain letters to darken them. Then the last part is lashes. I know we only have 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to go over this quickly. Lashes are the only part of a face that I'll let you just use the pen, like straight out. So just draw them in. Reason being, when you do lashes, and you've already got all this kind of writing going on, doing written in lashes are just going to get kind of lost in the rest of the writing. So if it works better to just carefully draw them in, you can. Now remember, when you do lashes, you don't want to be doing this, mostly especially if you're using Sharpie, because when you pick up, it leaves like a dot. So you need to go in a more delicate sweeping motion. And pay attention to the direction they're going in your picture, how long they are. And with micrography, less is more with lashes. I definitely did too many on my picture earlier, so I'm spacing them out a bit more. So if you draw too many, then they really just get lost and you kind of lose some of your shading. So definitely do less lashes than you normally would. Just enough so that you can see that they're there. So there's a finished eye. This is the one I finished earlier with the eyebrow done. Again, I will put this video in the post from today. I'll probably also put in my example picture just so that they're both there if you need to review it. But today, please turn in whatever you finished or finish it up and then turn it in. I do want to see what you did for the practice. So again, I can give feedback if needed. But otherwise, I will see you guys next week. Remember, next week is a 5-day week. So that whole Monday is all online, all at home. Tuesday and Wednesday are in-person days for group A. Thursday and Friday are in-person groups for group B. So do go to that schedules page if you need to kind of review what schedule you have. But otherwise, I will see you next week. Please do look at the playlist as well.